I'd like you all to know about Project Censored is that it is a student-based project. You are people that help contribute to the project. A lot of my students at Diablo Valley College have transferred to Sonoma State and worked with Peter, who's been director the last 13 years, and they're published in the book. That's another thing I wanted to tell people is the students do a lot of the research in here. Obviously with oversight from professors and using library databases and LexisNexis and community evaluators and so forth. But these stories and the things that are in the book, we go through a lot of vetting. We go through a lot of double, triple checking as to, is this story factually correct? Was it covered? If it was covered, how was it covered? Was it slighted? Was it framed? Etc. So we spend a lot of time, and we put out a book every year. Carl started putting books out in 1993, so it went from sort of being a project and a report and so on that students were doing into a full-blown book. And now the book, I don't know if this is good or bad, but the book is bigger every year. It seems that we have more stuff in the book every year. The book's over 400 pages now, and quite frankly, we could have had a lot more stuff in it. This is also why Peter and I are now working with Media Freedom Foundation and Media Freedom International to continue reporting about things that don't necessarily make it into the book all year. Because the project isn't really just about a book. It's about this problem of this lack of a free press and how there are many things that should be known about and that we should be having dialogues about in our free society that we're not, because most of us aren't treated with the factual information that provides the context that allows these kinds of dialogues to happen in the first place. So again, you can have democracy on paper and the free press on paper, but if we don't do them for real, we're operating under a series of illusions, and this also is what propaganda helps to erect and create. At any rate, so Project Censored develops into a book, and Peter takes the project over in 1996, and the book grows and continues to look at undercovered or censored stories every year. And these are stories then that are in the public interest, things that do affect our lives, but are just widely ignored by the corporate media. And by the way, since we're on the internet here, you can go to our website, projectcensored.org, and you can look at all the censored stories in the book for this year, from 2010. They're right here. You can click on each and every one of them, and you can go and read them for free. I mean, of course, it's great if you buy the book, because there's a lot of other chapters in the book on media analysis and so forth that are very useful. But the stories are right here. You know, the #1 story on U.S. Congress selling out to Wall Street. We'll come back to that in a minute. But I'd just like to point out to you here as a resource, and we've spent a lot of time this year with Adam Armstrong, our webmaster, really trying to make this information available to people, because this is why we do what we do. We have all the stories archived for all the years the Project Censored has been around. So you can go back and look and see what's been going on and what hasn't been covered. There's nothing new about this problem. So, including the fact that a lot of people seem to be unaware of it. That's also not new. So anyway, we definitely, part of what we wanted to do today is show you some of our websites and show us what we do, but we want to encourage you to go and check it out. Show your family, show your friends, make new enemies, you know, that kind of thing. But just talk to each other, share information with each other. It's okay to not agree about everything, but this is a great place to go and really get that ball rolling in terms of media literacy. So, at any rate, I was just talking a little bit about what the project does and how the project works. So the project obviously then is known for its listing its undercovered stories, the top 25 every year. They go through a vetting process. The stories are researched. They go through, again, as stated, library databases. They go through professors or community experts in the field. Students then research these stories to see how they're covered and to see what goes on. And then they go through the ringer again. They're actually voted on by students and professors that are involved in the project, and you can find those online. And at the end of the book, we explain how we do all the research, who's all involved. We have over a couple hundred community evaluators, and we now have over 30 college and university affiliates that are contributing to research with us, and we had actually 9 contributing just this year. And Peter's going to tell you a little bit probably about his globetrotting, but we've got a whole host of colleges and universities in Central and South America on board now, potentially even some in China and of course in Europe. So we're really trying to globalize this in a non-neoliberal way in terms of merely trying to get information to people about things that are going on in the world, about a majority of people, about working people, about everyday people, and stories that you don't tend to hear a lot about in the corporate media. So that's what Project Censored does, and a little bit about how we do what we do. But I'm going to give you a couple of examples here briefly about some of the stories and some of the other types of analysis we do. And I'm also going to tell you something else that Project Censored does, which is sad, but it's kind of a fun. It's at least a little bit of a sick pleasure, I suppose you could say. And that one of the criticisms that was given over the years about Project Censored was that, hey, wait a minute. Some of these stories that are in here on this list, you know, some of these stories were sort of covered, and maybe not all the details were covered, and maybe some of the stories weren't covered a whole lot, or maybe not at all, and other than independent outlets, alternative outlets, and they didn't really get the big splash. That's because maybe they weren't important, or that's because of editorial judgment, or what's called news judgment. Something doesn't merit our attention, really. Where debates can generate about the efficacy of the information or so forth. So, you know, both Carl and Peter thought that was a fair enough question. So let's take a look. And this, since 1984, Project Censored has been dedicating one chapter of the book every year. Well, before it was a book, but 93 on, it's a chapter in the book every year. This year I had the pleasure of writing that with a former student, teaching assistant, and Project Censored intern, Francis Capel, who's now at San Francisco State University working on a Project Censored affiliate there. And that's something called junk food news and news abuse. So given this criticism about what Project Censored, you know, is covering and saying, well, wait a minute, this is not a fair critique. These are editorial decisions, and that's why these stories aren't covered. So Project Censored started looking at, okay, let's take a look at what the corporate media does cover. Let's take a look at that. Let's see what they cover a lot of. Maybe in your recent memory, things like the Balloon Boy hoax, right? Lord knows that was a very important thing we know. Notice how that has cross-marketing going on with another reality show, and that ties into the corporate ownership of media and advertising money and for-profit information dissemination. Notice that. Notice how it's selling papers, getting eyeballs, getting advertisers. It has absolutely no relevance to anything in your life, right? Zero. But everybody knows about Balloon Boy. Michael Jackson died. That pretty much kicked all the attention away from the Iranian election going on. I mean, so notice how these junk stories kick other stories off the pages of the news. They become news in and of themselves. And in this year's chapter, I don't know how many of you maybe remember this, but we like to sometimes start chapters out with song lyrics or quotes, or, you know, things that are kind of, you know, poignant, little vignettes that remind us of some of these things. Anybody here remember the band The Eagles? A few people do. Yeah, remember Don Henley? He broke away from the Eagles, and the hell froze over, and they got back together or something. But anyway, that's not the point. Maybe hell freeze over if the news actually starts really reporting what's going on. One of the lyrics from his song Dirty Laundry in 1982 kind of really sums up this whole junk food news phenomenon. And by the way, that's before Carl started writing about it in 1984 with the Where's the Beef campaign, which was one of the early junk food news stories. We can do the innuendo, we can dance and sing. When it's all said and done, we haven't told you a thing. We all know that crap is king. Give us dirty laundry. It pretty much sums up the 24/7 cable news environment, which, by the way, starts right around that time. You got 24/7 to fill up news stories. We got 24/7 crap stories that we can feed you again and again. Some of this year's glorious winners include Olympic medalist Michael Phelps hitting the bong, right? Jessica Simpson's weight gain, First Lady Michelle Obama's fashion sense, the Brangelina twins, the ever recurring Brangelina twins. Lindsay Lohan dates a woman, the presidential first puppy. Barry Bonds' ongoing steroid escapades, the woes of Amy Winehouse, whatever the Spears girls are doing. These are the kind of things, you just can't get away from these stories. And so let's just take a look at one of these as an analysis of junk food to see how junk food news works and how it works against our actually knowing anything significant about what's going on in our society. And one of my favorites, of course, was Olympic medalist Michael Phelps hitting the bong. The story actually was blown in a major headline in a British tabloid, News of the World, called "What a Dope." And it showed him purportedly at some November house party in 2008 hitting a bong visiting the University of South Carolina. And by the way, Phelps is the winningest medalist, gold medal character in Olympic history. I'm not sure what the message here is in the corporate media. You know, if we sip of the weed, we can be 14-time gold medal winners or something. I'm not sure what the message is there. But, you know, what we weren't being treated to was a real serious, sober discussion about drug policy and how last year we threw over 800,000 nonviolent marijuana users in prison with taxpayer money. Why can't we have a front page story about that? What a dope policy, instead of focusing on Michael Phelps. I mean, again, it's not like we don't have a chance to talk about important things. I do this in my classes all the time. I send people out to research stories and look at things. Peter does the same thing. They come back with all kinds of crazy